Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Adriana was coming home from the mall, where she had spent the morning choosing a birthday present for her best friend Betty. Betty had just turned 25 a couple days later, the same age as Adriana herself, who had celebrated her own birthday 3 months earlier. Adriana had been struggling with the choice for a long time, trying to find something unique and unusual in a lot of stores. In short, something that could really please her childhood friend. In the end, she decided on a niche perfume and the latest model of cellular camera. Betty made her living photographing weddings and shooting entire family photo shoots. So, as was certain, Adriana could appreciate the new technique for her work. Some may say that such gifts are too expensive, and they would be right. Adriana always tried to buy only the best for herself and her loved ones, but she could afford it. It was all about the fact that her father Michael was one of the richest and most influential people in their town. He literally made $1 million as he was the owner of a whole chain of fashionable hotels, scattered throughout the region as well. However, Adriana herself is not in the example of many scumbags of rich parents. Behaved in relation to other people quite simply without any shadow of snobbery or social superiority. On the contrary, her daughter sincerely wanted to help those who in this life are much less fortunate than she. After graduating from university and getting a job in a design bureau, Adriana spent her free time volunteering to help people in need. Her parents did not encourage her, from their point of view, strange hobby. However, they hoped that in time, the need to be almost daily in the centers for the sick and the poor will pass in their daughter by itself. Not realizing that with these homeless people all the time to deal with death, sometimes the father resented it. I sincerely think it's your fancy. It's a completely useless endeavor. How many of these vagrants do not launder? How much money do not spend on them? And they will still go and beg for vodka, father. But you don't know how they really are, objected the daughter. These people are not all alcoholics. Some of them have really had a serious tragedy in their lives. They simply have nowhere else to turn for help, since most people, like you, have labeled them as drunks, deadbeats, and other such nonsense. In response, the businessman only looked sympathetically at his daughter. What a naive girl you are, Adriana. But nothing, you'll get married and you'll be out of your head in no time. All this stuff will be out of your head and you won't have homeless people to worry about. Cooking, cleaning. The kids will go again. Dad. Adriana resented me. I don't understand why you always see me as just an idle housewife. Sometimes it seems to me that you only dream of getting me married as soon as possible. Do you really want to get rid of me so badly? She looked away resentfully. The father immediately began to explain to his daughter in a peaceful tone. But what's the big deal? You know I only ever want happiness for you. Naturally, I expect you to choose the right husband. I need a man in my family to whom I can safely hand over all my affairs. And then what's in your head? This stupid idea that being a housewife is a bad thing. Look at Mom. She does exclusively housework and is quite happy. Adriana just shook her head. She knew that her mother, Kathy, had once given up a prestigious position in a multinational company to devote herself to her husband and daughter. It was her sacrifice, and it was she who had helped her father focus so much on his work that his business had blossomed and made their family fabulously wealthy. On the contrary, the saying for the family to try to keep the fire burning in the family hearth, so to speak, continued to exhort Michael. I do not understand why you went to work, as if we have no money. You know, if you want it, I'll buy you anything you want. That's why I want to work, hotly answered his daughter. I want to realize myself not only as a wife and mother, and that's in the long run, but also as a person. I love being a designer. It's a creative part of my nature that I'm not going to give up. Adriana squinted his eyes and looked at his father meaningfully. You've forgotten how much I suffered after the Ethan thing. And if it weren't for my inability to paint and volunteer at the center, I wouldn't be standing in front of you right now. Adriana's eyes brimmed with tears and she ran to her room. Even now, the thought of Ethan made her uncomfortable. Adriana shrugged squeamishly, remembering her last suitor. She stopped on the bridge and sucked in a deep breath of fresh spring air. By the way, this was the man her father had so zealously recommended. And when she did decide to get serious, it immediately became clear that her future fiancé is very windy and capricious. He was not ready to spend the rest of his life with Adriana alone. And so at every opportunity, he immediately looked for a short-term affair on the side. But that was all. The rich man's daughter found out much later. And then, despite almost a year since their separation, her memory obligingly planted the most colorful memories of how she caught him with some cheap Irina down and dirty beauty. And it was only 2 weeks before their wedding. Adriana, but come on, honey. It's not serious. Ethan tried to justify it to her at the time. She just, jumped me, didn't she? I just came into the room thinking she needed some help. You must have been so helpful that she threw all her clothes, including her underwear, all over the room in gratitude. Looking at him with painful disgust in her eyes, Adriana said, Mistresses, at this time, not wanting to become a party to the family squabbles, instantly oriented herself in the situation and hid in the bathroom. Adriana happened to notice this sweet couple on the way out of Ethan's office and couldn't help but follow them to the hotel, where she caught them in the act. But it's not at all what you think it is. Continue to rattle off cliches. Adriana's now cheating ex-fiancé. Please, let's hear my side of the story. A bitter grin shadowed the girl's face. Don't. Beloved, I think your version is now sitting in the bathroom and desperately dreaming of only one thing, so that I can leave. And to get out, I won't ruin her expectations. After all, she's probably freezing out there by now. Goodbye. With these words, Adriana left the VI hotel, running down the corridor to the elevator. Her negligent fiancé tried to catch up with her, being half blasé and shirtless, wearing only hastily dressed pants. However, the elevator door was slammed shut in front of his very nose, with the intention of leaving the elevator for good. And it's a vicious place. Adriana, after that incident, the girl immediately canceled the wedding, put the groom in the blacklist of the phone, and tried to throw the scoundrel out of her heart. But it was not so easy. Being a romantic nature, Adriana allowed herself to trust the young scoundrel and fell in love with him. When her father found out what had happened, he was ready to literally tear Ethan alive. The businessman promised his daughter, who was depressed, that he would give this scoundrel a sweet life and make sure that the boys would not take a job in any decent firm in their city. The threats, however, had little effect on Ethan. The same evening, he packed his things and flew to the other end of the country to Sochi, where he intended to spend the whole of the next month in the company of his new girlfriend. The betrayal was the hardest blow for the girl. She was already seriously preparing for the wedding, and the fact that she would spend the rest of her life with Ethan. At that moment, Adriana thought only about what attracted other men to her. She or her father's money, for the sake of which they are ready to pretend love and attention to Adriana for as long as they want. Parting with her fiancé made her reconsider her attitude to men. And now the daughter of a millionaire treated them with caution. She did not want to experience more pain that invariably came after the end of the love story. And her trust in the opposite sex seemed to be completely undermined. Immersed in her thoughts, Adriana was standing on the bridge when she heard first a thin squeak and then someone's harsh words. "Oh, you bastard, you flea, you're still biting. But it's all right now, I'll have some bread, not water, but fresh water." The girl turned in the direction where the voice came from and was horrified. A few meters away from her stood a tall, swarthy man in a leather jacket and held a tiny puppy by the scruff of the neck. He was broadcasting this and that, developing and trying to scratch or bite his offender. The rough type, however, was inexorable. "The thief will die," he shouted to the puppies, after which he squeezed his fingers and the little fluffy lump flew into the water with a shrill squeal. Adriana did not even have time to say a word. What there to stop the vivisectors? The poor girl, who witnessed a truly monstrous scene, pressed her hands to her face in horror, not knowing what could be done in such a situation. At that time, some vagrant fellow of about the same age as Adriana forcefully pushed away her jacketed tormentor. He jumped first onto the wrought iron railing with lightning speed, and then jumped straight off the bridge into the river with an arrow. Mommy pulled involuntarily away from Adriana for a split second. The boy plunged headfirst into the dark, cold water, but then abruptly surfaced and raised one arm above his head. To Adriana's amazement, there was a soaking wet puppy clutched in that hand. But more importantly, the living pup exhaled in relief and sent a thin-gloved palm against her chest. The girl didn't even notice how closely she pressed herself against his chest, watching the stray paddling deftly toward the shore. Finally, after several long and exciting minutes, the young man crawled out onto the wet sand and carefully laid the puppy down beside him. He himself lay on his back and for a few moments just lay there, enjoying the rest and the solid ground beneath him. The little fellow, who looked to be only about a month old, immediately picked up everything on his short, sturdy legs and swished noisily, trying to push the residual water out of his fur. He shook his ears some more and then, flapping his small, dense tail, ran up to his rescuer. He immediately began licking his face gratefully. Loud applause could be heard around the girl. It turned out that she was not the only one who watched with bated breath the fate of the puppy and the beggar who had thrown everything behind him. At least 5 people stopped nearby and clapped their hands noisily, shouting approving cheers for the young man now lying on the opposite bank. Finally, the homeless man slowly stood up and took his new quartered friend under his arm. Even while on the bridge, Adriana noticed that the boy was shivering from the cold. He was soaked to the skin. It was early spring outside, too cold to get warm and dry naturally. We should help him, Adriana thought, and quickly made her way down to the other side of the river, catching up with the tramp who was walking away. "Wait," she muttered lightly, touching his shoulder. "Wait, please." The young man stopped and slowly turned to Adriana. "Yes, I'm sorry, you and I know each other?" he asked politely. Adriana didn't even immediately know what to say. Despite the poor, tattered clothes and wet hair, the guy standing in front of her was a real beauty. Taller than her by almost a head, slender with beautiful, sultry brown eyes, and so warm he could easily have been a model, if not for his overexpensive neck, face, and sharp cheekbones, which from malnutrition stood out too much on his beautiful, prince-like face. I started for the girl, but stumbled half-heartedly. So stunned was she by the unusual appearance of the homeless man. "I saw you just rescued a puppy. You're a real hero." And this scoundrel threw the poor thing right in front of me, puppy, as if realizing that it was about him, loudly threw a few times, as if to scold the same vaudeville "Hush, hush, furry. Pet him, boy bum. It's all behind us. Don't be afraid, no one will hurt you again. I promise." After that he looked at Adriana again, and an embarrassed smile flashed across his face. "I noticed you too, didn't I? I thought I must have scared the hell out of you with my prank, but I couldn't do otherwise. It wasn't heroic. It's just that when I saw what the bastard was doing, I couldn't say anything." But Adriana understood so perfectly what he meant. The guy's jowls went up and down, and his eyes darkened, as if a terrible storm was raging inside the beggar. "I understand," the girl answered him with a brief smile. "And I am very glad that there are still people in the world with reflexes like yours." Then the homeless man realized and took one hand out from under the puppy and gave it to the girl. "Benjamin," said the guy, and he was getting a little teary-eyed. She shook his palm, icy from the cold water. "Actually, I was going to suggest that you come with me. I work at a volunteer center nearby. You're soaking wet and cold. You could dry yourself and put your things in a bag. I think we'll have something for you to change into." The dog barked happily, and Adriana allowed herself to laugh. "And we'll feed you for 6. Don't worry. We have a homeless animal shelter next door. They'll probably be happy to share some dry food or porridge with you." But as she looked again at his savior, "Come with me." Benjamin lowered his eyes and uncertainly shrugged, but still agreed. "Frankly, I could use a bowl of hot soup and a couple of paracetamol pills," he said, shivering. And he and Adriana went to the center. On the way, she risked asking the question that had been tormenting her all this time, though she felt sorry for the homeless man, and she realized that it would probably seem inappropriate to him. Adriana still couldn't control her own curiosity, though. Benjamin carefully began, "Anna, how is it that you came to live on the street?" The young man's boyfriend, all this time in the hands of a puppy, and now and then walked him, carefully looked at the Harris of the hotel business. "I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't ask you that," immediately apologized. "But it's just that you don't look like someone who doesn't feel like working and therefore has nowhere to live." Benjamin laughed low. His voice was pleasant, like velvet. "It's not that unseemly a question," he answered with a smile. "In fact, I spent most of my childhood in orphanages. A couple times a foster family tried to take me in. But then they had kids of their own, and they didn't need me. How's that for a puppy they were going to drown in front of us?" Adriana stopped and looked at the homeless man with genuine sympathy. "That's just awful." "Benjamin, that's no way to treat children," the girl said quietly. Who else would explain this simple truth to them? Benjamin answered her simply. "And then, when I got older, I got involved with a bad company. I had a small apartment when I was discharged, and the state was angry. So they cheated me out of it." At these words, the smile on Benjamin's face slowly faded. "I sometimes work part-time as a loader, sorting goods, in a warehouse. But it's all so hard, one-off work. Besides, it doesn't pay much. I still can't make it up." The guy explained his situation to her. Adriana was surprised by the simplicity and even indifference with which Benjamin told her about his misfortunes. It felt like he took everything that was happening to him for granted. Though he had nothing to compare it to, when even the foster families easily gave up on him. Adriana couldn't believe it. That there were still people in the world whose hearts were so calloused as to allow their owners to take a foster child back to the orphanage. "What happened before the orphanage? You don't remember at all?" she asked him hopefully. It couldn't be that he had absolutely no memories of his own family. However, Benjamin shook his head negatively. "I must have been too young then, because I can't even remember my mother's face, no matter how many times I try." Deli again sympathized with his rescuer, and they walked through the large doors of the volunteer center. There Benjamin was given first aid, examined. Fortunately, he had not caught pneumonia. They also took him to lunch and gave him new dry clothes. Benjamin never tired of thanking Adriana, especially since she had been able to place the puppy very well. The puppy was fed and watered, given all the necessary vaccinations, and then returned to its rightful owner, who was now a young homeless man. After this case of death, Benjamin began to see each other periodically in the city. The guy sometimes came to the center and happily talked to the girl, which helped him in a difficult moment for him. Charlie, that's what Benjamin named his pet, slowly grew up and did not stop accompanying his master. Following him, Captain Adriana every time rejoiced at the sight of him, so charming and cheerful so was. In time, she began to regard the stray as pet as her good friends. Between Benjamin and the rich Harris began little by little to blossom a mutual sympathy. Adriana felt in the company of this guy as if they had known him for years. The more they talked to each other, the more they had in common. Benjamin even began to help the center and sometimes worked at the animal shelter next door. Now he was no longer afraid of being misunderstood around others like him. On the contrary, he wanted to do as much for them as he could. Benjamin would help in the kitchen, wash and sweep the yard in front of the center or care for the animals in foster care. Adriana responded by disappearing into his company more and more often. She couldn't explain it to herself, but she was drawn to this beautiful beggar like a magnet. But Benjamin himself, for all that his heart fluttered with the same warm feelings, behaved like a true gentleman. And he did not claim anything but friendship with the girl. "I'm not sure we should cross the line." "Really?" He told her when Adriana couldn't stand it, and asked him if he felt for her what she felt for him too. Why didn't she understand? "Don't you like me at all?" "I thought there was something more between us." "It's not that." Adriana replied with a deep sigh. "You realize that you and I are from very different worlds. You're the daughter of a millionaire, and I'm just a simple hobo off the street. As hard as it is, I didn't want to be with you. In my mind, I know it's just not possible." There was a look of genuine amazement on the girl's face. "So you care about my social status?" she interjected. And then her beautiful dark eyebrows rose decisively. "I'll talk to my father. Benjamin, we should be together. I know you think and feel the same way. Benjamin took the lessons in his own and pressed his face against them. A painful smile came to his lips. "Adriana, honey, you don't want your father involved in this. I'm sure he will. He would probably disapprove of your choice." But the girl was very determined. "We'll see about that. He said he wanted me to be happy more than anything. Let's see if he really means what he says." Adriana looked into her lover's eyes and saw the sunset rays reflected in them. Both of them were thinking the same thing at that moment. Benjamin whispered softly to her, but he understood without words. A moment later, the lovers merged in their first fragile, but full of the most sincere tenderness and love. A kiss. However, when Adriana returned home, she no longer had to explain anything to her parents. Her father stood in the middle of the living room, forcefully clutching the glass where his caring wife had already thoughtfully stockpiled the sedative. On the table in front of him were pictures, obviously taken by someone from a safe hiding place. They showed Adriana with Benjamin happy and kissing. "How long did you intend to keep this from me, from my mother and me?" Barely holding back anger, asked Michael, shocked by what Adriana saw. Nevertheless, immediately realized who the pictures were taken by. Betty sighed to the girl and muttered to herself under her breath, "But thank you." He was being friendly and friendly. "I can't hear your answer." "Daughter," the father continued to interrogate, "how long have you been hiding from me that you're dating some ragamuffin?" "He's not a ragamuffin, Dad. He has a name." Adriana snapped back, and the businessman stretched out the name menacingly. "Do you think I can accept the fact that you are studying with a bum, while you reject the normal young people I advise you every time?" It took Adriana a lot of strength not to burst into tears right here in the living room from resentment and misunderstanding. Still, the girl tried to explain to her father, "Don't you understand, Dad? All these men from high society, about which you so dreamed, and not all want to marry not me personally, and your money. And Benjamin is a completely different kind of person. It's me he wants, and he's really a very nice man. You don't even know how we met. He rescued a puppy that some jerk threw in the water. He just threw it in the water. So Benjamin threw himself into the icy river after him. I think that act alone can tell you a lot about him." Michael took a few small sips and waited a few seconds for the sedatives to take effect. Then he stroked his stomach and hummed, "But before saving the mongrel, that's so noble. Don't tell me you thought he was your knight on a white horse afterward. Honey, remember, he's a bum." "So what? I don't care at all," replied Adriana, blushing with indignation. "Ethan was from a very powerful and thoroughbred, as you like to put it, family. And what? How did it all end?" "Yes, his nature was so rotten that there wasn't even a place to put a sample." The daughter took a big breath and said, "I'm not backing down. Daddy, if you don't let me keep seeing Benjamin, we'll leave." The businessman couldn't believe his ears. "Are you crazy? Where to?" The mother who stood aside all this time timidly dared to say Adriana, "My joy, but maybe you shouldn't be so hasty to make such a drastic decision." Adriana looked at her with eyes full of sadness and tears. "But do you even hear me? I love Benjamin. I love him like I've never loved anyone before. We're meant for each other. God, I just don't know how to explain it to you." Adriana collapsed to her knees in the middle of the living room and wept bitterly. Her mother rushed to hug her and began to comfort her, while her father clenched his teeth and let out with a whoosh into the air, uttered with a hearty sigh, "All right, so be it. From a bum, my mother, and I can still make a decent man. But I got one condition for you. You bring your homeless guy to live here. I want to see. What's your fiancé like in the real world? I mean, anyone can save dogs and sweep floors. Try joining our company, much less our family. He's got to earn that." "Dad, thank you," hotly thanked his daughter. "I promise you that you will not regret that Benjamin and I will be together. He's so loving, so understanding. And he makes me really happy. We'll see." Dad said dryly, "If he really is what you say he is, then I might be able to get him into our company. A low-level position, of course, to start with. But it will be a real job, and he could learn from the professionals." Happy Adriana hugged her father tightly. The next day, however, when she told Benjamin about it, he suddenly objected. "No, darling, I can't. I don't want to embarrass you with my presence. What do you mean? I'll stay at your parents' house. We're not even married yet. Have you changed your mind? She decided to tease him a little. No, of course not. I'm really scared. Benjamin, but I don't even have a ring to propose to you. And here I have to live under such a luxurious roof. Adriana just laughed. I don't need a ring. I need you at our Charlie. Yeah. Don't even say anything. The dog's coming to live with us too. Does your dad already know about this? The homeless man asked her apprehensively. Yes, I told him everything. The girl nodded in response. And what was his reaction? With a slight smile, the guy asked. She rolled her eyes slightly and stretched. Well, he grumbled a bit at first, of course. It's been a long time since we've had pets living with us. But then he got over it. Yeah, your dad should be honored for that kind of patience. Benjamin shook his head. Then he put his arm around Adriana and said softly, I promise you that as soon as I can get back on my feet, I'll buy you a ring as beautiful and expensive as you want. Adriana closed her head in his clean sweater fragrant with the scent of a fresh spring morning, and said affectionately, Lord, what kind of a fool are you? The first few weeks in the businessman's house were the hardest for Benjamin. He was unaccustomed to living in such comfortable surroundings. Even the soft bed on which he slept for the first time in years. At first it seemed too loose for him. Benjamin. So what to do a little more, and he would fall through the layers of feather and down and fall on the hard laminate floor. The worst part for Adriana's fiancé was that he was constantly expecting to be criticized by Michael. The harsh businessman did not hide his dislike for the guest, and in every way showed that he tolerates him in his house, and solely for the happiness of his only daughter. However, in parallel with this, Michael kept his other promise and instructed the best specialists of his company to arrange a guy something like a watercourse in the affairs of the company, so that he could at least roughly imagine what amount of work awaits him if he becomes the official spouse of Adriana and the legal heir to the hotel business. I have to tell you right away, Benjamin was warned by Adriana's father. We're on the job here. Ours is not a game. I've spent years building this business with my own hands. I know every room in every hotel I own inside and out, and all this will be left to my daughter and grandchildren after me. I understand, Michael calmly answered Benjamin, but he did not know where to put his hands at that moment. He had never been so embarrassed before. The future father-in-law's shrewdness was something to be envied. You got one, a little bit. The boy answered honestly, but I'd do anything. If only Adriana would be proud of me and happy with me. I don't know anything about your business yet, but if you teach me everything, I won't let you down. I promise. The businessman looked at him so carefully and intently that the boy seemed to have lost the ability to blink. Or rather, he'd forgotten how to blink. I hope so. Benjamin said seriously and a little threateningly, because otherwise, especially if you suddenly sell me or Adriana, you, my friend, will be in trouble. Benjamin nodded silently instead of answering. Michael seemed satisfied with this laconic gesture. Gradually, Benjamin became a little more comfortable in the house of the rich and could embrace Adriana without embarrassment in front of her parents. For Charlie, his faithful dog, the guy installed in the yard of the luxurious mansion of millionaires a small box, where the puppy with pleasure slept and ate his food. Lovers every morning play with the dog in front of the house, or alternately walk it around the territory of the cottage village. Soon to the appearance of 4 new pets got used to not only all the household, but also the neighbors, who, by the way, were a wonderful dog in full delight. For Benjamin, his life seemed to begin to acquire some tangible meaning. And then Adriana noticed something strange in the behavior of the groom. One night, she woke up to Benjamin talking in his sleep. The phrases he was saying were in an unfamiliar language. What was it? Adriana wondered. He speaks as if this language is his native tongue, or he learned it since childhood. But how is that possible? The next morning, she asked her lover about it. However, Benjamin did not remember anything of the sort. Maybe you just imagined it. He asked her again. People talk in their sleep. I must have carried something away too. Adriana shook her head. That's the thing, no. You were talking very clearly. I'm pretty sure of that. The guy just said, I don't know, but you don't have to worry about that. I don't know what I could have dreamt. A week later, the strange phenomenon happened again, and then another and another. And then Adriana realized it was time to find out what she was hiding. The reason for the groom's mysterious nighttime conversations. The next time Benjamin started thrashing around on the pillow again and uttering mysterious phrases, Adriana quickly turned on the record button on her phone, and the whole conversation was on the device's built-in voice recorder. Fortunately, the girl had a professor she knew, a linguist, to who she immediately went the next day. After listening to the recording, the man was quite surprised. You say your fiancé speaks this language only in his sleep. Is that correct? That's right, Adriana nodded. Do you have any idea what these words might mean? The linguist listened to the tape once more just in case, then shook his head. I can't tell you the exact translation right now. It will take some time, but the group of languages I have determined quite accurately. It is a Romance group, most likely some Scandinavian dialect, maybe Norwegian or Swedish. Yeah, it's definitely European. Swedish, Norwegian. Re-questioned the astonished Adriana. All right, Professor. Thank you. I'll wait for the translation. Adriana returned home completely puzzled as to how her Benjamin could know such complicated languages. According to him, he had spent almost his entire life until now on the streets. Alarmed, the girl took her fiancé to her room and locked the door from the inside. Adriana, honey, what's wrong? Asked the boy with a confused smile. Why did you lock yourself? She sat down opposite Benjamin and looked carefully into his eyes. Benjamin, promise you'll tell me the truth. Whatever I ask you. I swear, without hesitation. The groom answered her. What is it? Adriana started pacing from corner to corner and gesticulating emotionally. Remember I asked you a few days ago, do you know other languages? You answered that you didn't. I remember, of course, nodded the boy. But what does that have to do with it? I don't understand. Yes, the fact that in the dream you spoke in some Scandinavian dialect, Benjamin blurted out on the emotions of the girl, the professor, does not yet know what those words mean. But he definitely told me that you know a foreign European language. Benjamin wiped sweat from excitement, hands from jeans, and again looked at his bride. By the look on his face, the girl realized that he really didn't understand anything. He was as surprised as she was. This is some kind of nonsense. Adriana uttered at last, Benjamin, it's hard to swallow. How can I know another language when I've been in orphanages all my life? I still have nothing to say on the subject. The girl was discouraged. For a moment, she thought that Benjamin might have been pretending to be a bum all this time. And really, what was really going on? She asked herself later, did anyone expect to see a spy in his place? He was ashamed of his own thoughts. It turned out that now she again could not fully believe her fiancé. What a vicious circle. However, the most interesting thing was waiting for Adriana ahead. Having received the translation of the phrases that Benjamin had spoken in the dream, the girl was slightly dumbfounded. It turns out that the guy in pure Swedish pronounced the names of the city street and called the address of the house. So it was concrete data. So now we're going to find out the whole truth about you? Mr. Bond joked to herself, Adriana, and began to find out who lived at the address given by the groom. Luckily, she didn't have to go to Sweden at all. She simply ordered all the data online. After all, her father's money was supposed to listen to her happiness. Then it turned out that in the house the homeless man was talking about lived a married couple, Christina and William, had a son, Liam. Feeling that she was closer to the truth than ever, the girl sent a request to these Swedes with Russian names, which she made thanks to the connections and finances of her father and family. She told them everything, of course. And Benjamin, though he was shocked to learn what kind of investigation his daughter-in-law had done in secret from him. In the end, he accepted it. In the end, the girl showed him the tape of the night conversation. And the young homeless man was also curious how he could know such a complex and beautiful language. If during the day, in his right mind and memory, he could not say a single word in it. Camille, having received the request, immediately responded, no matter how strange it might sound, but it was as if they felt that they should certainly visit Russia. In a reply letter, they thanked Adriana for her attention. The girl explained that it might be related to their family and promised to fly over as soon as possible. 2 weeks later, the Greens with suitcases stood on the doorstep of Michael's house. Adriana was shocked to see two perfectly normal, middle-aged people dressed in the latest European fashion. In addition, their son Liam, a very nice young man of the same age as Benjamin and herself, had flown in with them. Christina looked as if she were made for the movie screen, and William held himself with the dignity of a true northern man. The girl also pretended that the couple had been living abroad for many years. Having accepted and accommodated them, Michael invited everyone into the living room and then called Benjamin Sparrow there. A young man entered the living room and modestly introduced himself and sat down opposite the couple. Adriana briefly told them the story of her fiancé. After that, there was a heavy silence between all the guests for a few moments. Christina turned to her husband. "Is it really true? Has this day really come?" The woman slowly rose and approached Benjamin cautiously, touching his shoulder. "Your eyes," she said. A little audibly, "God, you have my eyes." Then she turned back to her husband. An understanding smile played on his lips. "Yes, he looks a lot like me when I was young. You do have your eyes. Liam, why don't you say something?" He poked his son in the shoulder. "Looks like we finally found your lost brother. After all these years, Lord." William couldn't stand it any longer and let out a stingy manly tear. Immediately he rose to his feet, and he and his wife overtook Benjamin, who turned out to be, miraculously, their own son, who had been missing for many years. Benjamin, of course, had not expected anything like this and was more embarrassed than usual. He didn't know what to say. After all, the only question that bothered him was why had they let him end up in an orphanage? Why did they ruin his possible normal human future from a young age? However, he soon learned the answer. Camille Sami had started this sad conversation. "The fact is, you were kidnapped, son," began William. "You were 5 at the time. That's why you don't remember anything. We were young then, and our business was just starting to pick up," Christina continued for her husband. "But our competitors were stepping up too. Not a day went by that they didn't try to get in our way. What they did, what services they did not put on us. In the end, we made the difficult decision to leave the country," her husband went on to say. "After an agonizing choice, we decided on Sweden as the safest place to live with children. We bought a house and hired a nanny to teach you and your brother the basics of Swedish. At the time, you were just a kid, and everything seemed like one big fun game." William shook his head sorrowfully and wiped away his tears. "She was the one who didn't have time to teach you just the name of the town where we were to live, the street, and the house number. And then something terrible happened. You were kidnapped by those bastards, Benjamin, our competitors. It took us a long time to figure out how they could steal you from a locked house. Then we realized these scoundrels bribed the nanny to open the door and let them in. They blackmailed us, offered us your life in exchange for money and company records. Of course, we were willing to give that up just to have our son back with us." Benjamin's father was having trouble breathing, and it was his wife who finished his story for him. "The negotiations never took place. We don't know exactly what happened, but the kidnappers just didn't show up. Time was short, and we realized that if we didn't leave now, we would all die. We looked for you for a long time afterward, son." Tears glistened in Christina's eyes, but all the strings were broken. "We couldn't even find the orphanage where you were probably taken by those damned subhumans. You and Liam are twin brothers," Benjamin's father explained. "Liam always missed you, often cried when he was a child, as if he knew that somewhere in another country he had a native Ukrainian, a brother." Benjamin shifted his gaze to Liam, and he gave a weak smile. "God, that's quite a story," the homeless man said slowly, then smiled at his parents. "I'm still getting used to it, of course. There's been too much on my plate lately, but I'm really glad you found me, even after all these years. Mom, Dad, little brother." He nodded toward Liam. "It's all thanks to your fiancé." William said softly in response, "If it weren't for her and her attentiveness, we would never have known you were alive and such a wonderful man." Benjamin took no offense to the family. At that moment, the boy was overwhelmed with strange feelings, excitement mixed with joy. Everything that was happening seemed to him a wonderful dream, from which he was now and then afraid to wake up. Adriana was astonished at what she had heard. It turns out that her favorite is not a bum at all, but the son of no less influential businessmen. They offered the guests to stay with them for a while, because the house was huge and there was enough room for everyone. The businessman from Sweden agreed, but warned them that they would be flying back on business for their company in a few days. Strangely enough, the least happy in the whole story was Benjamin's younger brother Liam. He was born 3 minutes too late, as Benjamin and his parents explained later. The young man saw in the newly declared relative a competitor with whom he would have to share his parents' business. Less than anything else in the world. Liam wanted to explain something to the drifter who had appeared out of nowhere after all these years. The fact that this guy was Liam's own brother didn't bother him in the least. He was hoping to take over his father's mother's firm. And now this homeless guy is the only bright spot in the house. It's Adriana. Liam thought to himself, that's the kind of bride I'd like. Beautiful, smart. And she seemed to know business much better than all those skinny Swedes with their lean faces. Outwardly, of course, Liam didn't show his displeasure with his brother. He behaved impeccably. Michael liked him very much. In addition, Michael was attracted to him by his brilliant education and vast experience in business. Needless to say, Adriana's father would have been much happier to marry his daughter to Liam than to the kind, but completely uneducated Benjamin. Michael pondered for some time whether it was possible to change anything on this chessboard. When to his great amazement, he realized that Liam was also not in love with his found brother. Then the businessman decided to use this opportunity, thus fundamentally changing the fate of his daughter. You, my dear parents, go home and do not worry about anything, said goodbye to his mother and father Liam. Michael and I will try to organize together a business here at the junction of our two businesses, so to speak. Why? Is the destination profitable? Hospitality tourism is booming these days. Would it make sense to invest in this venture? I'll get to know my brother better. You don't mind Benjamin, do you? Benjamin didn't really like his brother talking to him like that. It seemed a bit familiar to him. But what can you do? Maybe in Europe, there are different standards of communication between relatives. And Benjamin should just get used to it. Of course, everything will be fine, the former homeless man assured his parents. Well, if you're sure you can manage without us, then we'll probably really fly back, William said, smiling with happiness for his sons. Still, our work has not been canceled. Christina kissed both sons and the future bride goodbye. Then the Swedish businessman left the house. For Benjamin suddenly came a new reality, in which his younger brother literally pursued, trying to periodically find out all his hobbies, habits. Except that every time the young homeless man told him something personal, he turned everything Benjamin said into an offensive joke. The most unpleasant thing for the older brother was that Liam tried to do it in front of Adriana, as if intentionally trying to break up his brother and his fiancée. Adriana was a smart girl and paid no attention to Liam's teasing, though it wasn't very pleasant either. But Liam literally fluttered around the girl, surrounded her with his attention, and every time pleasantly surprised her with his elegance, impeccable behavior, and manners. It didn't matter whether it was a joint dinner at their house or a trip to an exhibition, where Liam was almost the only one who knew by heart the names of all the paintings, as well as their history. Thus he tried to make the best impression on the girl with his erudition and knowledge of etiquette. But his own brother did not look favorably on this background. Benjamin had no opportunity to learn all this. As a result, Adriana's father and Liam decided to create a conspiracy against Benjamin. They needed to get rid of the hated homeless man as soon as possible, and they agreed to take the most drastic measures to do so. One day, when Benjamin was returning home from the volunteer center, he was stopped on the road by a police detachment to his great surprise. What is going on? Uncomprehending, the young man asked the law enforcement officers as he was roughly placed on the hood of a police car and began to be searched. The citizen asked in a stern voice one of the police officers, You are being detained on suspicion of possession and distribution of illegal substances. Do you have the right to remain silent?" "What? Jesus, what substances?" exclaimed an indignant Benjamin. "There's been a mistake. You've got the wrong guy." He tried to explain, but all he got in return was a crooked smile from the cop. "Don't yell, snotty. We'll sort it out at the station. Is it a mistake or not a mistake?" Then a small bag filled with white powder flashed in front of his nose. "It's not mine," Benjamin said confidently. "What are you guys?" Yeah. Right on the label. Quite a second policeman. That's what every dealer says." But then you find out a lot of interesting things during the interrogation. Benjamin was unceremoniously pushed into a car and taken to the police station, where, after a short thought, they put the poor guy in the monkey house. "Sit down and think about life for a while," said the officer on duty, "and the big uncles will decide how many years you'll have to sit in jail." "Yes, I was framed," Benjamin kept repeating, only now grabbing Six by the head on the cramped cell bench. "Wait a minute. I'm supposed to get one phone call." The desk clerk looked at him like he was an idiot. "Did you see that in the movies too?" He did not hesitate to spit on the floor and said, "This is not allowed in our country. It is already the investigator decides who and when you can call. He decided that it would be too fat to give you such a privilege. But I have my brother's fiancé at home. They're gonna lose me." I begged, holding on to the bars. "Benjamin, at least let me call my fiancé. Be a human being." And his father yelled at him on duty. "We are human beings, but you are a rotter. You lose children and all kinds of retards with your poison, so that you can ruin all the statistics for us." Having decided that Benjamin was no longer worthy of socializing, the duty officer staggered to his workplace and sat down on the rotating table. "God help me." Benjamin could only whisper to himself. It looked like he was in for a very bad story. Meanwhile, businessmen Michael and Liam, who had organized this whole setup with illegal substances to get rid of Benjamin once and for all satisfied, sat in Michael's billiard room and enjoyed making plans for a joint business. Echo. "Now my Adriana will marry you and give you away, and we can be at ease. We can open your branch in our city." And the father of the bride said to smoke a cigar. "But you better finish with your brother quickly. We don't need to keep him in jail. It would be necessary to speed up the trial, so that the guy was sentenced to the maximum term. Then we'll never need him again." Liam just smirked in response. "I'm already working on it. Dear father-in-law," he said jokingly, "don't doubt that my brother will get his. I've already arranged for him to have such a picnic by the roadside that he will probably want to go to the grave himself. An old millionaire," and he smirked his lips. "You're a tough guy, Liam, like a shark. But I like that about you. I can tell. You're a master of your craft. You won't let my company go under." "How could I not?" Michael responded calmly after all those years in the business. "You don't want to, but you have to grow teeth. Otherwise, they'll eat you at any moment before you know it." Parents Benjamin and Liam, of course, did not suspect what the younger son and his hypothetical father-in-law were doing behind their backs. They thought that the men were here to develop business. But instead, the clever brother and the businessman put the unfortunate Benjamin behind bars. And now they tried to persuade Adriana to give up her former fiancé and choose the cunning Liam as her husband. Benjamin was having a hard time in prison. Liam paid a lot of money so that the poor homeless man was constantly beaten and tried to be subjected to all kinds of humiliation. Benjamin fought back as best he could. He bore his imprisonment steadfastly. However, in his heart, he already realized that his moral strength was coming to an end. After all, he saw absolutely no help and support from the outside. Adriana at first tried to get a date with him, sent him letters every day. However, the nasty younger brother, and here an insured, bribed the guard so that he did not let Benjamin not a single message, and all requests for meetings with her fiancé. The girl was invariably refused. On this ground, Adriana quickly fell into a depressive state, lost a lot of weight. She could not imagine how she would live on if her Benjamin was imprisoned. Liam decided that this was the best opportunity to take action. Expensive gifts, gallant courtship. At first, they did not make exactly no impression on the girl. She rejected all Liam's attempts to get closer until he decided to go to the bank and resorted to the most despicable weapon of all possible lies. "Tell me, what do you know about your Benjamin?" I asked Adriana once. "I don't mean how wonderful he is, how much he loves you. I don't know what you're implying." The girl said coldly, "I don't know what you're implying," and bent. Liam arched her eyebrows. "He's my brother, of course." But even I didn't believe him when he said he couldn't remember anything from his childhood. Adriana frowned. "What are you talking about?" Lana asked. "I remember my childhood very well. I started Liam when I was 5, and how we moved to Sweden, and how I learned the language." Benjamin, on the other hand, went through the stress of being kidnapped. He didn't remember a thing. "Don't you think that's strange? Does that happen under stress?" Adriana shrugged. "Sometimes a child's memory just blocks out unpleasant or tragic memories. I think my brother is a first-class liar." Gently putting his hand on her shoulder, Liam spoke in a unified voice. "And I don't understand how such a beautiful and intelligent girl. How can you not see it? I love my fiancé and trust him in everything." Dropped Liam's hand. Adriana and the fact that they found banned drugs in his possession, and he did not use them. "Do you believe it too?" Asked eloquently, looking at her, the younger brother. That the girl did not believe her ears. But father said that it's just some mistake, and the police would sort it out. He just didn't want you to get upset before you got upset. Missed Liam. Adriana, your father is a saintly man. Letting that junkie live under the same roof with you for so long already shot Adriana's feelings. Now seemed to have shattered into atoms. Had Liam been telling her the truth and Benjamin had just been deceiving her all along? She knew very little about his past life, though they were, as they called it, soulmates. Suddenly the girl looked at the whole situation differently, and the first timid doubts closed in her soul. This was just what Liam needed, who, being an experienced manipulator, very quickly inclined the girl to his side. Adriana simply could not imagine that the father and brother of the groom could deceive her, and that's why she cried several nights in a row. She decided to give up Benjamin for good. The result was a speedy trial and an impressive sentence for the former homeless man, who henceforth turned into a convict. His yesterday's fiancée, being completely enamored with Liam, was preparing to marry his younger brother. Benjamin no longer saw any meaning in his existence. He had lost everything he held dear and loved more than his own life. There was only the black unknown ahead. In a moment of the heaviest despair, while already in prison, Benjamin met a young man named Stephen. He was serving time on a murder charge, but he explained to the former homeless man that he had been framed in the same way Benjamin had been. It was self-defense. Stephen told him, "They'd either kill me or I'd kill them. You couldn't take the third. My colleagues in the business did what they had to do to make me see the sky, but I have a son growing up in the wild. He's a great kid, and my mom is very sick. I'm afraid she won't live till next summer. I wish I could say goodbye." Benjamin couldn't understand how he got that feeling. But he believed Stephen's words, and in his person the boy found a faithful cellmate. However, one day came a day when Benjamin had too much. He was astonished because Stephen offered him an escape. "Come on, Benjamin," he urged him. "I can't do it alone. But together we're strong. What happens if we get caught? Have you thought about that?" I whispered to him. "Then you and me will never see the outside world again. But we'll have a chance to see our loved ones one last time." Stephen said gloomily, "That's no joy in our situation." In the end, Benjamin agreed to run away with Stephen out of boredom and hopelessness. And by trickery and cunning they managed to sneak out of the colony, hiding in a car for the transportation of dirty laundry. It was an extremely risky endeavor, but they had no other chance. Once free, they ran so fast that the air in their lungs was about to burst into flames. But after a few hours, the young fugitives were still being chased. It was impossible to disappear from prison and remain undetected. "But that's it," Benjamin nodded Stephen to him. "God willing, we'll get it together again, and good luck to you. I hope you have time to see your mother and son." Benjamin shook his hand. They missed each other at one of the intersections. Benjamin ran straight to the restaurant, where, as he found out through one of his acquaintances, Liam and Adriana's wedding was to take place. When Benjamin burst into the hall at the height of the fun, he saw her in a beautiful wedding dress. The girl's eyes were filled with shock and sadness. Liam glared at her, looking around, not understanding how his brother had ended up here. Benjamin looked at him with undisguised hatred and contempt, though there were tears in his eyes. It was both resentment and disappointment that the closest thing he had to a sibling after so many years had suddenly betrayed him. Breaking through the crowd to the microphone, the former prisoner took it in his hands and, looking his frustrated bride in the eyes, said, "Adriana, and all of you who are sitting here today, you can't even imagine what kind of scoundrel's wedding you are attending." And Benjamin told everything, especially about the illegal drug scam. Stephen helped him to find out the truth, because he had good friends on the outside, who were good friends with some corrupt policemen. Adriana stood dumbfounded. A veil fell from her eyes. The girl could not utter a word, only pressed herself against Benjamin and tightly wrapped her arms around him. Liam, seeing that there would be no wedding, wanted to quietly sneak out of the restaurant, but ran into a lot of disapproving looks and, deeply prestigious, sat down on the edge of the table. "Benjamin, I'm sorry," Adriana whispered to him. "I was such a fool to trust that brother of yours, and most of all my father. I knew he never liked you. Forgive me if you can, my love." Benjamin put his arms around her and whispered softly back, "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll be fine." At that moment, the police SWAT team rushed into the restaurant with a deafening shout, not knowing what to do. Benjamin rushed up the stairs. He hoped to jump out the window, but he did not calculate the height, as the restaurant was on the second floor of the building. As the young man jumped, he tossed awkwardly in the air, causing him to land on his back with such force that his spine fell asleep with a loud thud. Benjamin immediately lost consciousness from the pain in his eyes darkened, and he didn't remember anything else. Waking up in the prison hospital, Benjamin realized that he could not feel the lower part of his body. The doctor next to him grimly explained to him that he would need a serious operation to get back on his feet. "So I'll be an invalid now?" Barely audible, Benjamin asked, "unless there is someone who can pay for your new back, alas." The prison doctor said with a wave of his hands. At the same time, on the other side of the city, in Michael's mansion, the unfortunate Adriana, shut in her room, overheard her father and Liam arguing outside the door. They were not the least bit shy in their expressions as they passed by. "What are we supposed to do now?" "Michael, how do you eliminate my brother? I don't know how he escaped from that prison. I paid the warden so much money to keep an eye on him. Not only did he embarrass us in front of everyone, but there's no way this case isn't in the press. If it does, your company will be finished." The elderly businessman responded just as emotionally. "I'm afraid we have no other choice now. We'll have to Benjamin in the prison hospital." Michael whispered something in the ear of Liam, and Adriana pressed, and at that moment to the door and frozen quietly, like a mouse. She even tried not to breathe, so as not to give herself away. She only heard the very end of the sentence, spoken by her own father. "We have to take care of him, you know. It's in our best interest." Adriana clamped her hand over her mouth in horror to keep from screaming. The girl had no doubt. It was about killing her lover. Benjamin instantly sprang to his desk. She pulled out a notepad and a phone and called her brother's parents in Sweden. When Christina picked up the phone, Adriana did not hesitate to tell them what had happened. The mother on the other end of the line. She didn't immediately realize it was about her sons. But when she realized, she pulled herself together and with a voice like a steel string said, "Adriana, honey, wait for us. We'll take the first flight out and sort everything out." The next morning, the door of the mansion was pounded by the angry Camille couple. "Open up now, Michael. Liam, we know you're in there too. Adriana told us everything. There's no point in playing holy simplicity with us." The front door slowly creaked open, and Christina first entered the spacious bright hall of the mansion. "Mommy dear, we didn't expect to see you so soon." Opening his arms towards his mother, Liam spoke in an icy voice and smiled broadly. But instead of hugging her son, the woman slapped Liam with all her might. Of course, Liam did not expect such a warm welcome, so he involuntarily shrieked and recoiled from his mother. "What is going on here, Liam?" Christina exclaimed angrily. "We left in the middle of the night. We dropped everything and flew here. What did you do with Benjamin?" Nothing. I didn't do anything to that bum," her son answered her resentfully. "He turned out to be a drug addict and a criminal himself. He ruined my and Adriana's wedding. As far as I remember, the girl was supposed to marry your older brother, almost pimply," said the business lady. And that's when William entered the conversation. He silently walked over to his son and grabbed his elbow and twisted his arm, so that he folded himself in half in pain. "I didn't expect you to be so low and mean." "Son," the father said through gritted teeth. "Well, confess, who put you up to this adventure?" Michael's voice came from downstairs. At that moment, from the second floor of the authentic carved staircase, the young man himself did a fine job. "We just wanted to replace one brother with another." Much more successful replacement, choked with indignation Christina. "How can you be so cynical about people? This is not a piece of furniture or plates in a table service." "God, and how your daughter Christina lives with you?" "Adriana's coming out of the kitchen. We gotta hurry. I just called the prison. They said Benjamin needs an operation. Otherwise he wouldn't walk." "My God," the brother's father exclaimed, and then looked menacingly at Liam. "You're coming with us. I don't know if my brother needs any help. At the same time, you will see where you are hidden from your family." When the couple arrived at their son's prison, they decided that it was best to go straight to the head of the colony. There, in his office, Camille had a long conversation with a rotten elderly man, explaining to him about the need to review the case. In the end, the latter agreed, unable to resist Camille's numerous promises to live everyone out of the light. Called on all his connections from the past, Swedish businessmen spouses were able to achieve the release of their son and transport him to the best private clinic in the city. Thankfully, they had the money for the operation. Therefore, Benjamin's treatment was started immediately. The operation lasted almost 8 o'clock, when it suddenly became clear that the young man urgently needed donor blood. Best of all, here, of course, a blood relative will do, the doctor explained to Camille. In your case, a half-brother is ideal. William pushed Liam towards the doctor. "There we have it, my little dove. He can't stop dreaming about helping his brother. Isn't that right, Liam?" Liam grumbled grudgingly. "Why again? I don't want to. I'll give this tramp my blood." "How did you, Benjamin, come into our lives? It's like you're all obsessed with him and you've forgotten all about me. And now you're surprised. We can't force you to give blood," answered with a slight ironic smile surgeon. "But it seems to me to save someone's life, even if it is unpleasant to you specifically person. It's always a noble act. Don't you think?" Liam turned to his parents. They looked at him with the coldness of an iceberg in the ocean. In the end, the young rascal shrugged his shoulders and slowly wandered to the testing room. But he came back from there very quickly. Why did he come back? Isn't his brother's blood also suitable? The mother of the young people asked the doctor anxiously. The doctor first looked at the couple in surprise, and then turned his gaze to their negligent young son. "No, just with the tests in this comrade everything is fine," he evasively said. "I'm afraid it's something else entirely." "Well, doctor, don't bore us," William begged. The medic unfolded the test results and said sullenly, "Liam is not Benjamin's brother. That's what science says." Christina almost fainted at those words. But her husband picked her up in time and sat her down on the soft couch in the hallway. How can this be? Confused, learned the name and address of the midwife. What delivered Christina's baby? When they arrived at the elderly woman, it turned out that she was very ill and was preparing to go into the next world. However, she immediately recognized the businessman, even though it's been many years. "As long as I am you before I die, so to speak," slowly she said. "I invite you two to the point of madness. I could not understand. Why do you want everything, and others like me and my poor friend, who lost that night, baby?" "Nothing." The midwife stared at Christina and then said regretfully, "Is it my fault you're raising 2 different children?" I took one of your sons and gave it to my single friend so she wouldn't be so hard on her baby. I kept hoping they'd have the rich man's genes in their lives. Maybe one of us would get rich too and live like a human being." The old woman laughed bitterly, and this laughter sharply turned into a chest cough. "Where is our son now?" Trying to wipe away the tears running down her cheeks, Christina asked her. "Yes, he went to school in prison," the elderly midwife. "Your genes didn't bring him luck, framed him, and they pinned the murder on him. Now he's sitting in the snow on the prison wire, counting." "You mean our son," began Christina and looked tearfully at her husband, pale as a sheet. "What murderer?" The old woman only shrugged her shoulders. "Who can tell? Maybe he really killed someone. Or maybe they're really lying. But he's in the penitentiary now. His name is Stephen the Menace." The Greens looked at each other in surprise. They had heard that name before. That was the name of the second criminal with whom Benjamin had tried to escape. Could it mean that the siblings had met under such heinous circumstances? The couple traveled to the penal colony where Benjamin had recently been held. "You again?" The warden was indignant. "I think you and I have already figured it out," and explaining to him that now they had another reason for their visit. The businessman received in reply a meaningful look from under the bushy eyebrows of the chief. What kind of family is this? With a Brazilian twist. Calling Stephen, he left them alone with their parents. Except for the security guards, of course. The Camilles told the kid all about his brother and who they were. To say the prisoner was shocked would be to say nothing. He was caught right after he had time to say goodbye to his beloved mother and see his son. He was taken in by Stephen's cousin. However, he donated his blood and thanks to that Benjamin was saved. From the help of his real parents, Stephen refused. "Thank you for your trouble, but I'll do it myself. No offense, but I had a great mom, and I would never give up on her. We'll keep in touch with Benjamin, of course. He's my brother after all." The Camilles didn't insist. It was enough for them that their second lost son had grown up to be a decent man with his own correct principles. They waited until Benjamin, after several long months, was finally able to get back on his feet, and then they went back to Sweden. Liam, by the way, left the country as soon as he found out that he was not related to his parents. They continued to communicate, but not as warmly and trustingly as before. William was very disappointed in the adopted son and gradually reduced to whether his participation in their family business to a minimum. Adriana, on the other hand, was with Benjamin, whom she had diligently cared for throughout the rehabilitation period. They finally got married. The girl left her parents' house, and she and her husband rented an apartment not far from the center, so that Adriana could more conveniently get to work. The young family is well helped by Benjamin's parents, because with his own father, the girl wished to break off any relationship. Perhaps someday she will be able to forgive him, but obviously it will not be soon. Benjamin began to learn the basics of economics and financial accounting. Now he is consulted by his father via video link, giving him advice and direct from Sweden. The guy is very eager to try to join the family business in the future, and his parents are only too happy to do so. "You will succeed, son." William encouraged him. It's all about patience, and starting from scratch is never easy. A couple months after the wedding, Adriana told her husband the good news. They were expecting their first child. Adriana is now really happy, and in this she is supported by her mother, who often comes to visit. Charlie from the parents' home, they also took with them to the apartment. He feels great and continues to run around the rooms and bark loudly. As for Benjamin's second real sibling, he soon fell under the amnesty and went free. Now he and Benjamin communicate very well, and Stephen is raising his little son independently. Into small business. The man gradually returned and is making quite decent progress there. Turns out the man owned a chain of small bakers around town, and now he again continues to develop his favorite business.